Greetings everybody, this is going to be a quick review on how to solve or work through the concept of a Punnett square. So just a few things to remember. A Punnett square is always going to be a 2x2 grid, and on that Punnett square you're going to place basically the two parents. So along the top I'm going to consistently put the mother, or whoever is donating sort of the egg, so to speak, or the female alleles, and then down the sides we're going to put dad. So again, whoever is donating the sperm. Please make sure, again, you're reviewing the really important concept that if you have a dominant allele, you're always going to use a capital letter. And if you are using a recessive allele, you're always going to use the lowercase of whatever that capital is. And that's going to be a really important concept as we go forward. So please make sure you have a piece of paper because these examples are not in your notes. This is simply a tutorial to help break down the Punnett squares that we'll be talking about in class. Okay, so this is an example where we're looking at cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis is a disorder that basically will inflame your lungs. So it's a genetic disorder, which means it's going to be passed down from parent to offspring. But we need to make sure we understand a little bit about this disorder. So let's make sure we actually read the question. So it says we have a couple, they're looking at having a child, but there is a history of cystic fibrosis. So we need to make sure we do a cross. So they have both the man and the woman discover that they are carriers for the recessive, really important concept here of cystic fibrosis of this allele. So before you start your Punnett square, list what you know from the question. So here's what we know. We know that cystic fibrosis is going to be recessive. So if it's recessive, that means I need to have the lowercase version. So let's actually break this down. If I am normal, we're going to say I have a capital C. Okay. If I have cystic fibrosis, because it's recessive, I need to have those little c's. So I'm just going to draw a little c with a bar across the top. So remember, because this is recessive, I'm going to have both of them as that lowercase in order for me to actually show this disorder. Okay, so that's really important you understand. The other thing we need to break apart is this idea of what's called a carrier. A carrier would be someone who is heterozygous. So that means they're going to have a capital and a lowercase. So they're going to have a normal unaffected gene, which we're going to represent with a capital C, and they're going to have an affected gene, which has the lowercase. This is heterozygous. So these people would present as normal. They would not have cystic fibrosis. But if, when and if they were to make a child, if both of them were to deliver that little c, then we could have a problem, okay? So let's now make the cross. So we're going to put mom across the top, and mom is a carrier. So mom is going to have a big C, little c. And dad, we're going to put down the left-hand side, and he is also going to have a big C, little c. And now you need to do the cross, okay? So again, depending on how you like to do them, I can go in, and because I'm using different colors, I can then put in all of mom's letters. So mom would have two big C's and a little c, and then I can go in and I can write in dad's fairly easily. Now, one of the things I do want to make sure you point out is please always make sure you have the capital first and then the lowercase. Okay, so this is basically the cross where top left, we're going to have big C, bottom left, big C, little c, top right, big C, little c, and then bottom right, little c, little c. So what's important before we even go to the questions is actually summarize what you know. So I'm going to summarize the phenotypes. Remember, this is what they would show. So in box number 1, this individual would be normal because they have two dominant normal genes. In box number 2 here, we would say that this person would be normal. They wouldn't have cystic fibrosis, but they would be like their parents. They are a carrier, as is the upper right box. But the bottom left or right box is now someone who has cystic fibrosis. They're now going to show this because they both have those, again, a homozygous recessive. That means you're going to have it. So now maybe let's look at the questions. So let's see what we need to do. So we've built a Punnett square that describes the cross. We've done this. What is the percent probability that their child will develop cystic fibrosis? So that is the square right here. So basically we have a 1 out of 4 chance that they will show cystic fibrosis. That's the probability. The next question, what percent probability that their child will be a carrier? So again, a carrier is someone who's going to have big C, little c. So if I look at that, that's going to be 2 out of 4, or 50%, would be a carrier, which means obviously, that 25% would have cystic fibrosis. And then the last one, what is the percent probability that their child would not inherit cystic fibrosis? So this would mean that they're normal. Okay, so the only square we have left is right here, top left. So that's 1 out of 4, or again, 25% would be normal. So the other thing you need to make sure you do, and I think most of you have gotten pretty good at doing this in class, but if you haven't, again, please make sure that you also know how to describe the genotypes. So in case you haven't, this question hasn't asked us to do that, but if I asked you to relay the genotypes, if I had big C, we would say that the phenotype to this would be normal. That's what they express. But the genotype, this would be homozygous because they have the same letters, and this would be dominant. Remember, dominant are both of those capital letters. The other genotype I have is big C, little c. We would call this heterozygous. So again, this is just a review of your vocabulary, because they would have one of both the dominant and the recessive, or capital and little letter. And then the last one, we have 2 lowercase. And again, those bars across the C's, just try and outline because I have a letter that looks similar, and because capital C and little c do look the same. This would again be homozygous, because again, they're the same style of letter, but because they are both the lowercase, that is homozygous recessive. Okay, next example, we now have something called a Huntington's disease. If you want to, you can pause this video and go research Huntington's. It's a pretty significant, debilitating genetic disorder, but with Huntington's, it slowly shuts down basically your entire body. So it's essentially about 3 or 4 other neurological disorders all wrapped up into one. So you do start to lose functions of your muscles and your ability for your nerves to send signals from your brain to your muscles. It's a pretty debilitating disorder, but you usually don't know you have it until after 40 years of age, and that's when you actually start to present. So Huntington's is a pretty debilitating disorder. So let's take a look at this question. So we have a man who is heterozygous, that's a really important part, for the dominant Huntington allele. He has a child with a woman who does not have Huntington's. So here's what's really important. If this is a dominant allele, and again, this is your summary, it's because this is a dominant allele, even just having an uppercase, one uppercase S, or H, I'm going to use H because it's Huntington's. This means you have, or he has, Huntington's. Okay, so it's really important you understand that. Now, most people, and it's important you realize this, I can write out 2 genotypes for someone who has Huntington's. You can have heterozygous, which this question says, where it's a capital and a lowercase, or I can have a homozygous dominant. Now, if I have a homozygous dominant, for this, I am likely not going to survive at birth. When you have dominant issues, especially with things like a genetic disorder, if you have coded for both of these affected genes, you really have a very hard time of actually developing properly. So a lot of the times, if this is a dominant disorder, you typically would never survive. So most of the time, we would see this as a heterozygous, okay? But just to kind of point that out. So let's see if we can break this down. So we were told that the gentleman, dad, is a carrier, which means if we do dad, and we always are going to put dad down the side, he has a capital H and a lower H. He is a carrier. He's heterozygous. Mom, we're going to put along the top, again, just for convention. You can put either of these either way, but I'm going to try and have it mom always across the top. She does not have Huntington's, which means she is normal, so she's lowercase. So remember, dominant is you have it. That is a capital H. So normal, okay, is going to be the recessive, which is kind of a weird way of thinking of it, but this is how you have to kind of understand how these genes work. So now when we do our cross, okay, I'm going to put dad's in first because he had that dominant allele, and then I'm going to write in mom's. So again, always make sure you write in the capital first. When you have 2 of the same, it doesn't matter which ones you do first, mom or dad. So we've done this cross. It's hopefully correct. And now let's take a look at some of the questions. So we've done the cross. It says, write the possible offspring and the genotypes of this cross. So when we take a look at the genotypes, this is our letter combination. So one of the first combinations we have is big H, little h. So remember, this is heterozygous. This is the terminology we have to use. And if we look at the probability, we have 2 out of 4, which is going to be heterozygous, and this is 50%. Remember, this or these individuals will have Huntington's because this is a dominant trait. Okay, the only two other genotypes is little h, little h. So that is, again, if we're describing the genotype, this is going to be homozygous. Again, these are words you have to know how to apply, and this is recessive. Now, because this is a homozygous recessive, this means that they are normal. Okay, so we're going to have 50% of our individuals as homozygous recessive. Okay, so the last question is what percentage or probability of their child developing Huntington's? Well, unfortunately, that's right here. That's those heterozygous. So I have two questions that have the same answer. I'm going to have a 50% probability that their child will have Huntington's, and that's why having genetic testing is important if you have certain genetic disorders in your family. And again, that's within your genealogy task. This is an interesting question, so I hope that helps. Okay, this is the last example we're going to do with Punnett squares. So this is a unique one because this is now going to be a sex-linked. So we have apparently a woman who carries one of the defective recessive alleles on her X chromosome that causes hemophilia. So I'm just going to stop right here, and we need to make sure you understand what this means. Apparently, if you have hemophilia, this is a recessive gene. Okay, so that means we're going to have a little h. So remember, to actually have hemophilia, I need two little h's. This means I have it. But we have to be careful. Here's a really important concept. This is an X-linked trait. So if you are a female, let's write out all the possibilities that I could have when you look at hemophilia. So if I have hemophilia, I need to have two little h's on one on each of my chromosomes. This means I have hemophilia. The other combination is I could have both normal. Okay, so remember, capital for this case is going to be a normal because this is a recessive allele, which means capital H is normal. Then the last one I could have is I could have a carrier. So because I have two X chromosomes, I'm going to carry this, but I'm not going to have hemophilia. I'm going to have a carrier, or I'm going to be heterozygous. Okay, so if as a female, those are all of the options that I have with this disorder. Okay, now if we look at potentially with dad, okay, and this is an important part. So now if we take a look at what potentially dad can bring to the table. So here's X, here's Y, here's X, here's Y. Because this is an X-linked trait, dad's only going to have two options. He's either going to be normal, which means he is only going to have a capital X or H on his one X, or he's going to have a little h. And this means they are going to have hemophilia. So again, because this is an X-linked trait, typically it shows up more in men because they only have one X chromosome. And if it's the affected one, well, then it's kind of broken. Whereas if I'm female, even though I might have that little h as a carrier, if I have a normal functioning other X chromosome, it kind of saves the day because I have an extra one. So that's kind of an important part. So let's see if we can break this down. So we have a woman who she is a carrier for the recessive hemophilia. So let's put mom across the top. First thing, please always put her 23rd chromosome pairing. So I have an X and an X. Please make sure you do that. That's the number one thing when you have a sex-linked trait. And because mom is a carrier, I know she's heterozygous. She's a big H, little h. Then down the side, we have dad. Always put his X and his Y. And then let's make sure we take a look at what dad is carrying. She has a child with a man who does not possess hemophilia, which means he's normal. He's one of these. He's going to just have a capital H. There is going to be absolutely nothing put on this Y chromosome. Do not put anything here because this gene simply doesn't carry this trait. I cannot put anything there. I'm just going to leave it. So one of the things I would highly recommend you do is, again, put in all of your carrying chromosomes first. So these are your X's and your Y's. So if I bring mom's down, she has an X with a capital H. And then I'm going to bring dad's over. He, again, has an X and a capital H. Okay, so if I just stop on this box right now, you have a little girl, because it's XX, who is normal. She doesn't have anything to do with hemophilia. She has both the dominant normal. Now, if we do the next one to her right, dad determines that she's going to have the X with the big H, and then mom, because she was a carrier, gave her that little affected allele, that little one. So again, this is a little girl. Little girl is normal, but she would now be a carrier. Okay, if we now went down to the lower left box, we have 2 little boys. So again, mom is going to send the normal gene and dad's going to send the Y. The only thing dad is doing here with this little boy is he is basically giving this Y chromosome. He's determining sex. So men always determine the sex of the child because mothers can only give an X. So if we take a look at this little boy, he's going to be a boy. He is normal because he doesn't have that recessive gene. Then we take a look at the last one. Where mom, again, because this was her heterozygous, she's going to send the little H. That's the affected gene. And again, dad's just going to send the Y. So again, this little boy, still a boy because it's XY, now is going to have hemophilia. Okay, so that's how we finish the cross. So now if we actually look at the questions, it says, what is the % probability that she will have a child with hemophilia? So the way that this is worded, it says have a child. So that means I am counting all 4 boxes because all 4 of these are children. There is a 1 in 4 chance that they are going to have a child that has hemophilia. Okay, so that's again 25%. What's the % of females? So super important. This is now only females from this cross that are likely to have hemophilia. So if we look at only the girls, that's the 2 boxes here. None of these girls are going to have hemophilia. So this is a 0% probability because no girls will actually have it. Because in order to have a girl that has hemophilia, I need 2 X's and 2 small h's. That's not going to show up in this cross. And then the last question, what's the % of males born that are likely again to have hemophilia? Again, this is a really important understanding of the question. I only now want the males. So again, that's only these 2 boxes down here. And out of those 2 boxes, out of the boys, your chances now are 1 in 2. So that's now 50% of the boys that are going to have or will have hemophilia. Okay, so you have to kind of take a look at the wording of the question. If we ask all children, it's going to be 1 in 4 because, again, the girls would take into account. If we only look at the boys, it's going to be 1 in 2 or 50%. So I hope that helps understand these crosses. Please do practice. And again, focus periods are always open if you need help.